Okay. Disgruntled Printify print-on-demand sellers. We've got more documentation about Printify you're going to want to hear. These people are not your friends, and think long and hard before you trust them with your store and your money. Drop us a line with your story.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are taking a pretty serious look into a batch of source material. We've got documents compiling user reports, grievances, and what's being presented as alleged evidence about Printify.
Right. And these documents, they seem specifically prepared to, well, back up content that's exposing what the people behind it see as major issues. There's even mention of a project called PrintifyComplaints.
So our mission here is to unpack what these sources are saying, pull out the key claims, try to understand the picture this documentation is painting.
Exactly. It's not just random forum chatter. The source material looks like a deliberate compilation. It focuses on alleged service failures. What they suspect is retaliation against merchants.
Retaliation, okay.
Yeah, merchants who complain. And also how Printify's whole operational structure might play into all this. All right, let's dig in. The documentation seems to kick off with a specific case study, right? A seller named Peter. What's his story, according to these sources?
Peter's account is used as, like, a key example. The source says he connected Printify to his eBay store. Standard setup for many sellers.
Okay.
But the core problem described is, well, it's pretty stark. His eBay listings showed as active, looked totally normal at first glance.
But there's always a but.
Exactly. The buy button. The button customers actually need to click to purchase. It was just missing, gone.
Wait, hold on. Active listing looks fine, but no way to buy. So effectively, his store was, what, invisible to buyers? Or just unusable?
Unusable. Customers couldn't make a purchase. It completely shuts down sales, right?
Totally. And the source material, it alleges a very specific trigger for this happening, doesn't it? That's where it gets concerning.
It does. This is where the documentation draws a really sharp line. It claims this whole buy button issue, the thing that killed his sales, allegedly happened within 5 business days of Peter sending Printify a formal legal demand.
5 days. After a legal demand, what was the demand about?
According to the source, it related to previous technical problems he'd had, service failures he alleged, and, crucially, claims for financial damages because of those issues.
Okay, let me get this straight. The source says he sends a formal legal complaint about existing issues and money lost, and then boom, almost immediately his listings become unsellable. That timeline, as the source presents it, sounds, well, alarming.
It's definitely presented as alarming. And the documentation goes on to describe Printify's alleged response after this new issue appeared.
Let me guess, not helpful.
According to the source material, far from it. It states Printify allegedly banned Peter from contacting their support. Completely.
Banned him from support after he complained legally.
That's the claim. And that they ignored his emails about this new critical problem and offered absolutely zero justification, no technical reason, nothing for why that crucial buy button vanished.
So, if this source is accurate, they allegedly cut off his support after the legal complaint, ignore him when his store breaks in this weird way, and give no reason. The documentation is basically pointing the finger at platform retaliation, isn't it?
That is precisely the core allegation the source material hammers home with Peter's case. It frames it specifically. Alleged platform retaliation, a breach of good faith service obligations, and direct interference with his commerce.
Wow.
The documentation uses this sequence of events as evidence for those claims.
And it's not just Peter's story in isolation, is it? The sources pull in other user complaints to suggest this isn't a one-off. What else do they present?
Yeah, they definitely try to show a broader pattern. The documentation references posts from Reddit's Printify community, for example.
Okay, what kind of things are people saying there, according to the source?
Well, there are reports cited of users claiming they got banned from eBay in less than an hour after syncing Printify.
An hour. Banned from eBay just for syncing Printify. That sounds incredibly fast and problematic, if true.
It does. And other reports pulled from Reddit sound very similar to Peter's situation. Listings look active, but eBay says the item not purchasable.
Item not purchasable.
Okay. And crucially, when these users reportedly contacted Printify support was allegedly unable to explain why. They couldn't tell sellers why their items couldn't be bought.
So, same pattern alleged. Looks fine, can't buy, support has no answers. That lines up directly with what the document says about Peter. What about the quality of support in general, according to these Reddit reports?
A major theme highlighted in the source material, drawing from these Reddit posts, is that support apparently gives the same canned answer over and over.
Ah, the copy-paste response.
Pretty much. And according to these compiled reports, it doesn't actually fix anything. It suggests users are just hitting a wall trying to get real help for potentially serious technical glitches.
Okay, so we're seeing alleged patterns of serious technical issues blocking sales, support that's claimed to be unhelpful or unresponsive, and potential account actions happening suspiciously close to complaints or even just integration. The source has also mentioned the Better Business Bureau, the BBB.
Yes, the BBB complaints are also cited as evidence. The documentation details one example where a user claims Printify owes them money,
Right.
but their support ticket about it was just closed, payment never received. And then, allegedly, Printify just stopped responding to them altogether.
Money owed, ticket closed, ghosted. That echoes the support evasion claims and, yeah, based on the source, raises big questions about financial accountability. Now, the documentation shifts gears a bit, talks about Printify's corporate structure. How do the sources describe that?
This is where the source material argues things get,
Yeah.
let's say, structurally complicated for users. It points out that Printify's official headquarters, their registration, is in Riga, Latvia.
Latvia, okay. So, a European base. What's the significance of that, according to these sources, especially given where most users seem to be?
Well, the document really emphasizes this contrast. Despite being registered in Latvia, the source claims the overwhelming majority of Printify's actual business is U.S.-focused. It explicitly states over 90% of its merchant base, platform activity, and marketplace integrations. eBay, Etsy, Shopify, Walmart are U.S.-centric.
90%. So, a company legally based in Latvia, but almost all its merchants, activity, and integrations are in the U.S. What problems does the source material claim arise from that setup?
The documentation argues this creates major hurdles for U.S.-based sellers when things go wrong. It highlights Printify's legal disclaimers and terms of service.
The fine print.
Exactly. Which reportedly invoke foreign jurisdiction protection.
Yeah.
Because they're based in Latvia.
Okay, foreign jurisdiction. What does that actually mean for, say, a small U.S. seller who suddenly finds their store isn't working or payments are missing, according to the source? How does it impact them practically?
The source claims it makes pursuing legal action or even getting help from U.S. regulators really difficult. Trying to sue or get the FTC involved or a state attorney general,
Yeah.
it becomes much harder because the company operates under Latvian law and courts.
So it's harder to hold them accountable using U.S. systems.
That's the argument in the documentation.
Yeah.
It alleges this structure forces merchants into potentially prolonged or impossible legal battles across international lines.
Yeah.
Basically, a massive, expensive headache if you have a serious dispute.
So the source is saying, if you're a U.S. seller and you have a major issue, maybe lose significant income due to platform problems or what feels like retaliation, the company's very structure might make getting real recourse through U.S. channels incredibly difficult, maybe even impossible.
That's precisely the claim. And the source contrasts this difficulty with Prunus. Printify's really aggressive marketing aims squarely at those U.S. sellers and buyers, from whom, the source states, they make significant profit. So the picture painted is, heavily rely on the U.S. market for money, but use the foreign structure to, allegedly, limit legal and financial responsibility in that market when things go bad.
That framing by the source suggests, well, it suggests a strategy, doesn't it? Profit here, dodge accountability here. Let's loop back to those common complaints payments, support and view them through this structural lens, like the documentation does.
Right. The sources revisit those issues but stress how the foreign registration allegedly makes things worse for U.S. merchants. Take withheld or missing payments. The documentation cites reports from dozens of merchants across Reddit, Trustpilot, Shopify forums.
Dozens. So the source presents this as more than just isolated cases.
That's the implication.
Right.
These merchants describe not getting paid, huge delays, or just never seeing money they're owed. The sources also claim that when merchants dispute this, like with chargebacks, they're often denied.
Denied!
Yeah, and merchants allegedly get blamed for what the source calls internal glitches or Printify's own errors.
Wow. Blame for the platform's supposed mistakes, can't get paid, and limited options because of the structure. That sounds like a really tough spot, according to these reports. What about the support issues again in this context?
The problem of support evasion and ticket closures is framed as especially damaging here. The sources emphasize that for U.S. merchants, if tickets go unanswered, get closed early, or just get those canned responses.
Right.
There's basically no internal channel left to fix the problem.
Right.
And the foreign structure, as alleged, makes getting external help much harder too.
Which, according to the source material, potentially leaves U.S. sellers feeling completely stuck if they face major issues like lost income or, a blocked store.
Exactly. And the documentation connects this to the other things mentioned. alleged store shutdowns, order failures, even shadow suppression or listing visibility blocks.
What's shadow suppression again?
It's where supposedly your products become harder for customers to find or buy, but they aren't technically removed. It's more subtle. And then there are outright platform bans. And the sources claim these kinds of negative actions disproportionately happen after merchants make complaints, especially formal ones.
So let me summarize the narrative these sources are building, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Step 1, technical or payment problems pop up. Step 2, the merchant complains, maybe formally. Step 3, they allegedly face roadblocks getting help, maybe account restrictions, or even actions that damage their business.
Right.
And all the while, the company's Latvian registration, according to this framing, acts as a kind of shield against accountability under U.S. law.
That is the core argument synthesized from the source material, yes.
Yes.
It suggests Printify relies heavily on the U.S. market, but allegedly uses its foreign status and jurisdictional shields to sidestep financial liability and regulatory oversight when these significant problems, including alleged retaliation, arise.
It's a powerful and, frankly, pretty concerning picture painted by this documentation. Allegations of a company profiting hugely from U.S. small businesses while potentially using its structure to avoid responsibility for serious failures and maybe even punishing those who complain formally. Based purely on this documentation, these reports of service failures, payment issues, the alleged retaliation pattern, combined with that structural distance from U.S. regulations, it forces you to ask a really serious question, doesn't it? What does it actually mean to trust a foreign-registered platform with your U.S.-based business, your livelihood, your money?
That's definitely the question this source material seems designed to provoke, a critical one for sellers to consider.
Thank you for joining this deep dive into this documentation today.
Always interesting to unpack the claims presented in the sources.
And don't forget to send us your complaints about Printify.